Video games, one of the most recent forms of storytelling entertainment. One that began without the intention to tell stories at all, but as it evolved has become one of the most interesting and varied of the storytelling mediums today. Now, I don't need to tell you that video games are a valid medium to tell stories, you know that already. But keep in mind that gaming is still a new medium. To make a comparison to film, which I will be doing a lot today, admittedly, we are still in a 1930s equivalent. We haven't even hit Casablanca yet. However, in the short time that gaming has evolved, we have gone from looking like Pac-Man to looking like Polygon Cloud to looking like something that is almost indistinguishable from reality. But as gaming has evolved over the years, it tends to borrow more and more from traditional storytelling mediums like film. Keep in mind I am generalizing here, most games don't have the budget to compete with the photorealism of cinema, but as game engines are becoming more and more readily accessible and things like Unreal Engine 5 are putting photorealism in the hands of anyone, the possibilities of gaming starts to diminish as we start putting more computing power into making something look real. And this is not necessarily a bad thing, as I'll go into today. There are pros and cons to this. This isn't an outright, this is bad, gaming shouldn't be storytelling driven. It should. I just think it's an interesting development that we have gone further towards the traditional cinematic conventions as opposed to making something unique. So why is it that after 50 years of gaming evolution, we have tended to drift back into the conventions of cinema? Well, it's complicated. Part 1. Playing a movie. At its best, gaming can take the conventions of traditional cinematic narrative and expand them to make a more interactive and enriching experience for an audience. The original Halo trilogy is one of the best sci-fi action stories I've ever experienced, across all of the mediums, books, TV, movies. It competes with those, and I think it does so very well. However, the storytelling in Halo does feel like I'm playing a film. The story moments are intense, hijacking a scarab in Halo 2 and then seeing 2 scarabs fall in front of you in Halo 3 is an incredibly rewarding experience, but the interaction comes in how you approach the situation, not the outcome of the situations itself. Yes, it's incredibly fun to hijack scarabs and fight the Flood, but the outcomes of these fights are predetermined. If you lose, you die, respawn, try again. The narrative is linear, but this linear narrative is far more rewarding in the format of video games because you are the one in control. God of War's merging between cutscenes and gameplay complicates this even further. It doesn't make a clear disconnect between the active gameplay experience and the passive viewing experience. It merges it into one, and I think it does so very well. It helps balance the story of a father and son with the massive moments of fighting a dragon with a bow and arrow and exploding crystals. Metal Gear Solid's storytelling techniques borrow almost exclusively from cinema, Hideo Kojima himself a self-admitted cinephile, and you can see that influence in his work. His use of long expository cinematics to show you how this Metal Gear differentiates from that Metal Gear, and how Snake is slowly dying from nanomachine poisoning. But what sets it apart from its passive counterparts is that in the end you are the one who pulls the trigger. Sniper Wolf's final monologue in Metal Gear Solid has more of a meaning because you killed her. The final boss battle in Metal Gear Solid 3 has much more of an emotional impact because you are forced to kill the boss. But you're still forced to do it. Kojima's work struggles to break out of its cinematic conventions, but he still sees the power in placing the player in charge of the choices. Even if you have to make the choice, it means more if you are the one who makes it. Gaming is at its best when it takes advantage of the choices we make. But sometimes those choices don't really feel like choices at all. Part 2. Watching a game. Sometimes a game will restrict itself to the limitations of cinematic convention. Limited frame rates, motion blur, film grain. Naughty Dog loves this. They are probably the closest studio to making AAA playable movies. And now real movies, apparently. I think this is why a lot of people had problems with The Last of Us Part 2. For the most part. Most people love this game. I'm included in this. I think this game is very good. I don't think it's one of the best games ever made, but I really like the way in which it forces you to make choices in a way that no other Naughty Dog game has. But the main problem I had was that I was disconnected as a player. The characters in the game make such vile choices that I didn't feel like I was the one controlling them. I felt like I was moving them from place to place and watching them enact these terrible things. It's a very, very interesting way to approach interactive storytelling, but I did feel disconnected. I didn't feel like I was the one making the choices. Now, this does not mean the game is bad, please don't get me wrong. I think this is a very interesting story to tell in this medium because it's never really been done this way before. But I feel like the characters are more in control by the writers than by me. Go watch Nakey Jakey's video about it if you haven't already, even though probably everyone has. He articulates this a lot better than I will. Walking simulators are also a really interesting version of this. So I guess like Part 2A, walking simulators, games like Firewatch and Gone Home take full advantage of the gaming medium by creating environmental storytelling. But the gameplay within these games is how do I say this nicely? It's boring. I like these games, but like they're not games that I play to play. They're games that I play to listen or to read. Visual novels are the same. I just finished Danganronpa and I loved it, but it did feel like I was playing through a visual novel. Gameplay feels like it takes a backseat to the story, which is the primary focus of the game. But I guess we can't talk about walking simulators without talking about the walking simulator. Knock knock, who is it? It's me, Hideo Kojima. Death Stranding is a great game with really terrible gameplay. Put that on the cover of the director's cut. The storytelling in Death Stranding is really Hideo Kojima. And the gameplay of Death Stranding is really boring. The game is walk to place, cutscene, walk to place, cutscene. I'm exaggerating. Unless I played this game when it first released and I didn't know who Hideo Kojima was. I have since gone back and replayed all of the Metal Gear Solid games, and I'm going to replay Death Stranding eventually, and maybe I'll have a different opinion on it, and I'll make another video about that. But as of right now, I don't think Death Stranding is very good. I was trudging along this desolate environment, just desperate to get to the end of it. And yes, I get the point of the game is to have a desolate environment that I don't want to walk through and have other people help me walk through it, and that then helps. So technically the storytelling and the gameplay is linked, but still, Death Stranding is what I would consider cinematic gameplay. So if Death Stranding is cinematic gameplay, then what's the opposite of that? Part 3, gameplay with a capital game. Nintendo. Nintendo is the opposite of Death Stranding. Shigeru Miyamoto is always quoted with the prioritizing of gameplay. Reggie Fils-Aimé. If it's not fun, why bother? Fair enough. Nintendo began in the arcade era, and have just made modern versions of arcade games for the 35 years since. And they are great games, but story-wise though, Mario, save the princess. Zelda, save the princess. Metroid, save the princess, but this time the princess is you! I recently bought Kirby and the Forgotten Land for my cousin, and he asked me what it was about. And I was like, oh, I don't know, it's the Kirby, and he's a pink guy, and he swallows people and gets their powers. And he was impressed. Nintendo's arcade approach to game design put storytelling on the back burner, but so what? Mario Odyssey and Breath of the Wild are two of the greatest games ever made. The story lacks because the focus is on the story the player takes themselves on. Online games are the same. Call of Duty, Apex Legends. There are no story to the online components of these games, but who hasn't heard a friend brag about getting a 360 no-scope? Fortnite is actually an interesting exception to this rule because they have story missions within the online component. I'm going to do another whole video about Fortnite. I think it's a very interesting game, but that's why I'm not including that game specifically here in the online category. Stories in games aren't exclusive to ones told by writers, but also ones told by the players. This new era of open world design, games like Elden Ring and Breath of the Wild have little story, but the amount of stories I've heard of them are more than any writer could possibly dream up. These games tell a story that supplements the gameplay experience. One of my favorite games of all time, Celeste, has a focus on gameplay, but its story is fantastic. Its tale of self-worth and motivation is linked directly to the arcade-style level design. The story is not the focus, but something that supplements great gameplay. Please play Celeste, it's very good, I love this game so much. Part 4, the future. We have yet to find this balance between storytelling and gameplay, and this is something that is easier said than done. It's very hard to achieve. Gaming is currently in its teenager phase where we're trying to live up to Big Daddy movies. But I'm excited to see as we develop and enter our rebellious years how we'll reject that very nature of storytelling. Gaming is a uniquely interactive medium, but we've yet to see major games that take full advantage of that. A game whose story is impacted drastically based on your decisions, even more so than modern RPGs. Ken Levine's next game might just be our Citizen Kane. I look forward to the next era of game developers, one who have grown up in an age where the legitimacy of games has made everyone a gamer. Even Big Daddy Movies is trying to cash in. Gaming has become the primary entertainment source, so film and TV and novels and every other medium is now trying to compete to get people to stop playing Fortnite and get back into the cinema. Some examples in this video have had terrible storytelling adaptations. I talked about Halo and Naughty Dog games, and both of those have cinematic adaptations that pale in comparison. I have yet to see The Last of Us TV show, but I don't have high hopes for it, because again, what makes that game so good is its interactivity. I'm not sure how that will translate into television. At what point will the influence of gaming expand outside of other directors? We're seeing glimpses of it now. Directors like Jordan Vogt-Roberts and Duncan Jones have shown how gaming has influenced themselves creatively. Those who create games or star in games have reached that level of legitimacy alongside the stars and creators of traditional entertainment. We're on the brink of this new era of entertainment. One blurs the lines between gaming, film, television, where influence is everywhere. As technology itself continues to evolve at an exponential rate, so too will the gaming industry. Recently, virtual reality has become the new trend in both film and gaming, but while film struggled to make this transition, gaming has thrived. Half-Life Alyx stands as a shining example as the next era in immersive entertainment, one that is both narratively enriching and mechanically engaging. I'm excited to see the ways in which future developers take advantage of the medium itself as opposed to just copying the conventions of traditional mediums. There is always a place for the cinematic video game, but I just wish it didn't become the norm. Every game I've mentioned today I think is a great game, and whose story has impacted me enough to be memorable. The difference becomes in how the emphasis of the story is delivered. Instead of focusing on photorealism, we need to dial it back, reinvent the wheel, says me, a guy yelling in a room in front of a green screen. But you don't need budget to expand upon art. Indie games have been doing it for years, creating unique experiences only found in gaming. Celeste, Undertale, Papers, Please, Journey, that's not really indie, but you know what I mean. Take advantage of the medium. Tell stories only we can tell. Gaming has untapped potential. It just needs someone to change the game. And that choice is up to you. Thank you for watching. If you like the video, and subscribe and comment. You know what to do. Share it with someone you think would like it. That's one of the best ways you can help. You can follow me on Twitter at ALD Presents. It's the same. Just basically do funny jokes about things that are going on. It's mainly jokes, but it's like basically it's like this, but in 250 characters. So if that's something you'd like to do, go and do that. Thank you. I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.